Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of Removed Abilities, and this will likely be the final episode because I think I went over just about every noteworthy old school ability we're talking about that was drastically different from what the champion's current one is. There are a few that were different in properties, like how Darius' old Q was an instant cast as opposed to the current one having a delay, but after combing through the roster of champs, I compiled enough to make one final episode. Had a blast making this series. It's crazy to think about how the most viewed video on this channel was episode 1. I guess we're all suckers for nostalgia. In any case, I have like 8 or so to talk about this time around, so buckle in and let's get started. I'm honestly surprised I haven't gone over this ability earlier because it was definitely one of the abilities of all time, let me tell you. Omen of Death. This thing, Jesus Christ. How it worked is that Yorick would summon a clone of himself or a target ally champion with a portion of the stats of the original and pilot it just like how Shaco can control his clone. If the original champion died within the next 10 seconds, the clone would despawn and reanimate the champion for 10 seconds, giving them what is essentially Renata's W bailout but with the power budget of an ultimate. It was like a friendly version of Mordekaiser's old ultimate. It would be useful even if the copy didn't die because the clone would contribute meaningful damage, especially if you copied an AD carry or like a Jax or something. And even if that person died, you'd respawn with full health and full control over your character for a solid 10 seconds. Now considering how long 10 seconds can feel like in League, the enemy team essentially had to kill whoever Yorick ulted twice over, turning a teamfight into a 6v5 or a 1v1 into a 2v1. You couldn't focus down the clone because the original would kill you, and you couldn't focus on the original because the clone would full heal the original. I mean, they would die no matter what, so you just had to run away for 10 seconds and let them decompose, but unlike Sion who loses access to his abilities, or Karthus who remains in place, the revived champion had everything. Now it's been quite a while since old Yorick, and I don't remember if it functioned like Renata's W where it would still retain their buffs and whatnot, or if they would die, then respawn again but lose whatever buffs they had active like Master E or Jax ultimate, but either way, there's no way Omen of Death would have been allowed in the present day, not with the 200 years champs we have now. Next ability is Tahm Kench's old ultimate, Abyssal Voyage, very similar to Abyssal Dive except it was more of a macro skill and one of the best at that. With semi-global range, Tahm will mark a point on the map and sit with his mouth open for up to 6 seconds, during which any allied champion could click on him and both would be transported to that location. He could also just go by himself if he wanted to. While it may not seem all that impressive, Tahm's ultimate was insane on a macro level. If you think about it, any 1v1 suddenly became a 1v3, any 2v2 became a 2v4, any 3v3 became a 3v5. Tahm and his AD carry could be pushing top lane, then teleport to Dragon Pit at a moment's notice or vice versa. You could have Tahm courier his jungler from one side of the map to the other. Sometimes, depending on the champion, you can handle a 1v2 scenario if you're fed enough, but a 1v3 situation's a lot more dangerous. I feel like of all the global transports like Talia, Pantheon, Twisted Fate, etc., this one was the scariest because he had no idea who else could be joining the fight alongside him. Old Tahm Kench was one of the most contested supports in pro play for his ultimate in tandem with Devour being on a basic ability. I think solo queue-wise, Abyssal Dive's a lot more practical as it gives Tahm some good crowd control capability, but having a global transport that can also bring someone else along was a privilege no one else had before or since. Think about how hard they had to gut Ryze's ultimate to allow it to exist. It barely moves you anywhere. Next up, let's talk about Teemo. Didn't you know he used to have 2 different passives before his current one? They were both present in the beta though, so I'd be very surprised if there's any footage of it. If we can't find any, then my editor can just put regular Teemo gameplay on screen. In fact, these abilities are so old they don't even have a proper description on the wiki. But I'm talking about Eagle Eye and Trailblazer. Let's go over Trailblazer first. Teemo leaves behind a trail as he moves that reveals Fog of War and grants bonus movement speed to friendlies that walk through it. The latter part should be very familiar to you. It's the same trail that Elixir of Iron and the new Trailblazer item give. I'm assuming that's where they drew inspiration from. The first passive though is Eagle Eye, which I think is the more interesting one. Teemo has a wider field of vision. How much wider? Not sure, but assuming it's a good 30 to 50%, that's actually a really cool, albeit niche passive to have. As you know, vision's an essential component of League, and sometimes being able to see a bit further can give your team more information. I'm guessing they probably want to give Teemo a more practical passive, but I'm curious if any old school League players can recall how much wider the field of vision was. Hot take, but I never found Guerrilla Warfare to be all that useful of a passive. It does have merit, don't get me wrong, but standing still or hiding in a brush for X amount of time to get some attack speed feels like an afterthought most of the time. If you lose to Teemo, you rarely attribute it to his passive. On a side note, I noticed how 2 of Teemo's old abilities on the history page look like an airstrike and a nuclear explosion. He also had an ability called Mechnobot, which appears to be a mechanical orc for an icon. I really had no idea what they were trying to conceptualize Teemo as. Part of me wants to know what those did, but maybe it's for the best that we don't. Moving on, the next one will be Sejuani's old glacial prison, very similar to her current one in regards to form and function, but this one was far superior in every way. For one, there was no minimum cast range to get the full stun off. You could throw it at point blank and it would still achieve the same effect. Not just that, but it could also reach a stun duration of 1.75 seconds, slightly higher than the 1.5 it has now. I understand why they nerfed the max duration to give room for the new stun she has on permafrost right now, but if that wasn't enough to sell you on old Glacial Prison, it was also AoE. For all intents and purposes, Sejuani's ult ultimate was a projectile Malphite ultimate, easily one of the best engage tools of all time. I'm sure most people back in 2015 can remember the insane 5-man Sejuani ult from Meteos. It doesn't look that impressive visually since back then it didn't come with a giant slowing field around it, but trust me when I say, it had a very generous radius. It was literally a Malphite ultimate on a projectile. That was the one thing I miss about old Sejuani. I like the current kit she has right now, but I wish we still had the old ultimate. Definitely consider it to be super ultimate levels of good. She exerted the same kind of mental pressure on the enemy team that a Malphite would. Admittedly though, it was kind of unfair to have such a strong ability on a long-range projectile. The one drawback to Malphite's ultimate is how committal it is. He dives headfirst into the enemy team, so if he picks a bad engage, he's committed to it and will likely die for it. Glacial Prison on the other hand can be thrown from the safety of a full screen away, and then you can decide if it's worth engaging or not. Too much reward, not enough risk. Ability number 5, Zilean's W, Recall. A very simple ability. We all know his current W Rewind, lowering the remaining cooldowns on his Q and E by 10 seconds. Long ago though, his W used to be known as Recall, which had a similar premise. The difference being that he could reset his own ally's ability cooldown. I don't exactly know how he can control which ability gets reset, but the fact that such a thing was even remotely possible is inconceivable. Zilean's Q and E can afford to be double cast because they were designed that way. A single time bomb on its own does only damage, but 2 time bombs cause a stun. Time Warp is a tilting ability for the enemy team, but objectively, it's not the biggest buff or debuff out there. Same goes for LeBlanc, Seraphine, champs like that. But not everyone was designed with the consideration that their ability cooldown could be reset. Mind you, this was all the way back in the old days where we didn't have the same modern abilities we have now. But still, imagine 2 Morgana Qs back to back, a 6-second root. As such, it made sense for Recall to have an absurdly long cooldown for a basic ability. If it were any more spammable, that would be incredible. Imagine having Recall in the present day, giving Zed potentially a 3rd Shadow for quad Shuriken casts, or giving Cassiopeia 2 Miasmas, giving Yasuo 2 Wind Walls. Zilean would be the best support in the game. Ability number 6, Pantheon's old passive. Once again a very simple premise but with a really broken connotation. After 4 attacks or abilities, Pantheon will block the next basic attack or tower shot. You heard me right, tower shot. This also negated any on-hit based effects like Renekton Stun or Garen Silence. Not the most egregious passive out there. Sure, you can block 1 tower shot, but you need to attack or use abilities 4 times to get it back up. And Pantheon's not really the fastest attacker in the— oh wait, check out Aegis of Zionia, identical to Shield Vault, only this one gave him an instant activation of his passive. Pantheon could effectively block 2 basic attacks or 2 tower shots back to back, making him one of the most annoying lane bullies of all time if you're playing someone who relied on auto attacks of any kind, because he could block 1, then stun you, then block the next one, all while chunking you down really hard with his point and click spear. Worse yet, this made tower diving super easy on him. He could block 2 tower shots, so not only could he chunk you to low health with his Q, but he could then tower dive you really easily under tower by nullifying 2 shots. People complaining about how unfair new Pantheon feels, they've never seen old Pantheon before. As a top laner, you basically had no choice but to play like Malphite or something if you wanted to beat Pantheon. I know during its initial VGU they made it so Aegis Assault could block tower shots and then eventually did away with it, so they sort of maintained the bullshit tower diving he had for a short while, but yeah, I think overall any semblance of direct protection from towers goes against the notion of towers being a point of safety. Tower dives are meant to be high risk. Aegis protection took away that risk. Second to last ability will be Scion's Cannibalism. Nothing all that spectacular to be honest. What makes it so eye-catching though is the sheer amount of stats it gave. Just remember that this was arguably one of the worst designed champions in the game, who was split between half ability power mage and half attack damage bruiser. So if there's anything that would be a good example of only balance because it's on that specific champion, it would be this. Cannibalism gave him a 20-second long attack speed and lifesteal buff, wherein his auto attacks would also heal nearby allies for half the amount. To repeat, not the most impressive thing in the game even when accounting for how long it stays up for until you look at the numbers. 50% bonus attack speed is fairly average, but look at the lifesteal. 100% of rank 3. 100% for 20 seconds. For 20 seconds you could heal for 1-to-1. What the f***? Just imagine, like any AD champion, they don't even have to be an auto attacker. Anyone who builds a ton of AD suddenly healing for 1-to-1. Now imagine if you had this with the new Ravenous Hydra that has the 1.5 times bonus lifesteal on cleave. You would literally be indestructible. Draven players, they would take Cannibalism in a heartbeat. Heck, I think most AD carries take this ultimate. You could deal 1000 damage and heal 1000 damage. Straight up drain tank your way to victory and even heal your support on the side. 100% lifesteal, 100%, 20 seconds, 100% lifesteal. Having even 20 can make a champion ridiculous to fight. 100% lifesteal. Out of curiosity, I decided to go into practice tool and deck out Aatrox with as much AD as I could since he's a very trained tanking champion, and sure enough you can basically face tank the enemy fountain. Now you might not have 800 AD and all that, but point being you can see how 100% lifesteal would be pretty crazy to have even if it meant giving up your existing ultimate. On a ranged champion that would be even stupider since lifesteal is the same whether on melee or ranged. Last but not least, Mordekaiser's Mace of Spades. In short, it was an empowered basic attack that caused your next 3 autos to deal bonus magic damage, with the 3rd auto doing double what the first 2 did, or at least that's what it was in his final iteration before getting reworked. Way back during the Season 5 Juggernaut update though, the champion design team had the genius idea to give Mordekaiser's Q a bit more than that, and when I say a bit more, I mean his first Q used to do 1x damage, then second Q would do triple the damage of the first Q, then the third Q would do triple the damage of the second, for a whopping total of 9 times the damage of the first attack. In total, Mordekaiser's 3 attacks did 260 base, plus 390% AD, plus 260% AP in damage, with most of that coming from the 3rd attack which did 180, plus 270 AD, plus 180 AP. No idea what they were thinking with this ability. It had a cooldown of 4 seconds at rank 5, meaning you could get this ability off on the regular. At a certain point, Mordekaiser could do like 2000 damage with just the 3rd Q alone, and remember, this was back when Hextech Gunblade was the first thing you bought on him. So for reference, just with the stats of Gunblade, Mordekaiser's Q did 260 plus 156 plus 208 for 624 base damage, not even counting his base AD or anything. Then after building Dead Cap or other AP items, you had a guy who could one-tap you in the most literal sense of the word, let alone all the extra stuff he had like stealing Dragon or getting bonus XP and whatnot. When they flattened the curve to where the first and second attacks were the same and the third one did 2 times damage, the total output stayed roughly similar, only being slightly nerfed. So in reality, as compensation for going from 139 to 112, they increased the base damage so that all it really did was take a little bit off the top. But at the time, it was the most jaw-dropping thing to even look at. People who were around during Worlds 2015 might recall Mordekaiser having a 100% big ban rate, or damn near close to it, one of the most notorious quote-unquote bot laners in the game. In his defense, getting 3 attacks off was easier said than done considering he was on a champion with no attack speed, no gap closer, and no CC, not even a slow. So applicably, you could just walk away from Mordekaiser and you would never get 3 attacks off unless you were stupid enough to let him. Alrighty, that concludes my 7th and final episode of Removed Abilities. I had a great time making this for you guys. For those of you who were around to see these abilities yourself, I hope you had a nice trip down memory lane. And for those who weren't, hopefully this gave you a bit of insight on the kind of chaos that ran around even back in the old days. I know many of us talk about how overloaded and stupid the game is right now, but back then things were crazy too, just in a different way. Maybe I'll make an episode 8, but I pretty much covered every notable ability I can think of. Of course, I can talk about some smaller things like Zack's Soul Cube, but those weren't that interesting, so we'll probably keep it as 7. Give it like 2 or 3 more years after a lot of changes happened and I might revisit this, but I'm not sure if I'll even be making videos at that point. In any case, if you guys enjoyed the video, a like and subscribe would be much appreciated. Don't forget to follow me on Twitter @Vars, join my Discord server, and check out my other Removed Abilities episodes if you haven't yet. But till next time, thanks so much for watching, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Take care.